The luminous seeker shuddered as another plasma blast struck its port shields. Inside the sleek vessel's command center, Captain Elzix gripped the navigation console, his silver-flecked skin paling with stress. Krell vessels approaching from Vector 9. Science Officer Naya announced, her four-fingered hands dancing across holographic displays. Their weapons are charged for another volley. Shields at 23%, Engineer Corvo added from his station. Unlike his crewmates' slender forms, Corvo's stocky build and practical demeanor reflected his working-class origins. Captain, we cannot sustain another direct hit. Elzix's inner eyelids flicked rapidly, a sign of intense calculation among the Silvari. The research mission had seemed routine. Observe the primitive world from a safe distance, gather data on its unusual biodiversity, and depart without the natives ever knowing they'd been studied. The Krell pirates changing course to intercept them had not been part of any contingency plan. Prepare the phase drive, Elzix ordered. Naya's head crest flared with alarm. The experimental drive is not approved for. I'm aware of protocol, Science Officer. Elzix cut her off. But I'd rather face a review board than Krell torture chambers. Another blast rocked the ship. Warning lights bathed the command center in crimson. Shields at 8%, Corvo reported. Phase drive capacitors charging. On the view screen, 3 predatory Krell vessels closed in, their jagged silhouettes designed to evoke fear. The Silvari Federation had avoided open conflict with the Krell Dominion for generations, preferring diplomatic solutions to confrontation. Pirates operated under no such constraints. Phase drive ready, Corvo announced. Execute, Elzix commanded. The drive engaged with a high-pitched whine. Space distorted around the luminous seeker as reality itself stretched and compressed. Then came the unexpected surge, energy cascading through systems never designed to handle such power. Circuits overloaded. Containment fields collapsed. Power spike in the main reactor, Corvo shouted. The drive is destabilizing. Naya's voice rose in panic. Captain, we're accelerating beyond calculated parameters. The ship lurched sickeningly as space-time twisted around it. Through the view screen, they watched stars blur and stretch into lines, then vanish entirely as the vessel tore through the fabric of space. When reality reasserted itself, a blue-green planet loomed directly ahead. Emergency protocols, Elzix shouted. All power to shields and landing systems. The luminous seeker entered the atmosphere at a catastrophic angle. Outer hull plates glowed white-hot, then tore away. The command center went dark as primary systems failed, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across panicked faces. Atmospheric composition scan, Naya called out, professional training overriding fear. Nitrogen 78%, oxygen 21%, trace gases. Her voice faltered. Captain, this atmosphere is toxic to our biology. Elzix barely acknowledged her as he fought the manual controls. Prepare emergency breathing apparatus and survival gear. Corvo, status of distress beacon. Damaged, sir. Short-range communications only. The ground rushed toward them through viewport cracks. Below, an endless carpet of green conifer forest spread across snow-dusted mountains. Impact in 5 seconds, Elzix announced with silvery calm. Brace 4. The ship struck the mountainside with devastating force. Metal screamed as the vessel carved a half-mile trench through ancient trees before coming to rest in a steaming, broken heap. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured conduits and the crackle of small fires. Corvo pulled himself from beneath a collapsed panel, violet blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. He found Naya unconscious but breathing, her atmospheric filter already activating against the toxic air leaking into the shattered command center. Captain, he called, pushing debris aside to reach Elzix. The captain's eyes fluttered open. Status report. We're grounded, sir. Catastrophic damage to all systems. Elzix struggled to his feet, wincing at internal injuries. Location. Corvo checked a portable scanner that miraculously still functioned. Third planet, System CR-7721. Federation designation. He paused, his expression darkening. Earth. Elzix's inner eyelids flicked with dread. The quarantine world. Dr. Sarah Chen lowered her binoculars, her breath forming clouds in the frigid Canadian air. Did you see that? Her brother Marcus didn't look up from the satellite tracker he was recalibrating. If it's another moose, I'm good. Not a moose. Something came down on the eastern ridge. She nodded toward the wispy trail still visible in the twilight sky. Meteorite. Maybe. Marcus finally glanced up, his military-trained eyes narrowing. Too controlled for a meteorite. Trajectory changed twice during descent. He hesitated. Could be a downed aircraft. In the middle of Yukon wilderness, Sarah was already packing her gear. Could be survivors. Marcus's jaw tightened. We're here to track wolves, not chase shooting stars. Someone could be hurt. Sarah zipped her parka with finality. You can stay if you want. 10 minutes later, they were both trudging through knee-deep snow, headlamps cutting through the gathering darkness. The siblings maintained strained silence, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Should have stayed in Seattle, Marcus muttered. But no, had to come when my big sister called with her once-in-a-lifetime research opportunity. I didn't ask for your life story, Sarah replied. Just needed someone who could handle the communications equipment, and everyone else you knew had the good sense to say no. Before Sarah could respond, a flash of blue light pulsed through the trees ahead. Both froze. Military, Sarah whispered. Marcus shook his head. Wrong color. Wrong pattern. His hand moved instinctively to where a sidearm would have been during his service days. They crept forward until the source of the light became visible through the pines. A massive gash in the mountainside where something had crashed, leaving broken trees and scorched earth in its wake. At the end of the destruction path lay not an aircraft, but an unmistakably alien vessel, sleek and organic in design, though now shattered and smoking. Holy! Marcus breathed. Sarah silenced him with a gesture. Near the wreckage, 3 figures moved. Even in the dim light, their non-human nature was unmistakable. Slender bodies with elongated limbs, skin that reflected moonlight with a silvery sheen, and heads crowned with crest-like structures. One figure, stockier than the others, appeared to be setting up equipment around the crash perimeter. Another worked frantically on what resembled a control panel. The third lay partially prone, struggling to stand. We should go, Marcus whispered. Now. Call the authorities. Sarah was already stepping forward. Are you insane? Marcus hissed, grabbing her arm. She shook him off. They're hurt. They're aliens. They're people, Sarah countered. Just, not our kind of people. A thunderous crack echoed through the forest as a massive fallen tree shifted in the wreckage. The sound startled a bull moose that had been watching from the shadows. The creature charged toward the crash site, its massive form barreling straight for the injured alien. The stocky alien raised something resembling a weapon. The slender one at the control panel shouted in a high musical language. Without hesitation, Sarah raised her rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The moose veered away, disappearing into the forest. All 3 aliens whirled toward the humans. The one with the weapon aimed directly at Sarah, while the tallest, clearly in command, pushed himself upright despite obvious pain. We're not armed, Sarah called, setting her rifle down and raising her hands. Well, this isn't. I mean, we're not here to hurt you. Marcus grudgingly raised his hands as well. Just so you know, this is officially the stupidest thing we've ever done. The aliens conferred in rapid, musical tones. The stocky one kept his weapon trained on them while the leader approached cautiously. Up close, his silver-flecked skin and 4 pupilled eyes were mesmerizing. Then suddenly, the third alien, the one who'd been working on the panel, collapsed to the ground, body convulsing violently. Naya. The leader cried in obvious alarm. rushing back. Sarah moved without thinking, running toward the fallen alien. The stocky one stepped forward, weapon raised, but Sarah pushed past him, dropping to her knees beside the convulsing figure. Anaphylaxis, she diagnosed instantly, recognizing the symptoms despite the alien physiology. Marcus. My pack. Red side pocket. The blizzard howled outside Sarah's research cabin like a living thing, rattling windows and slipping icy tendrils through every imperfect seal. Inside, the air crackled with almost as much tension. You gave an alien an EpiPen, Marcus said for the third time, pacing the cramped living area. And Earth medication, for an extraterrestrial biology. It worked, didn't it? Sarah replied, measuring purified water into a pot. Epinephrine is a simple compound. The nitrogen exposure was triggering something like anaphylaxis. Simple luck, Marcus muttered. The three aliens had taken up separate positions in the cabin. The one called Elzix, clearly their leader, stood rigidly by the window, watching the storm with four pupilled eyes. The stocky one, Corvo, huddled protectively near Naya, who lay wrapped in thermal blankets on Sarah's cot, breathing more steadily after her near-fatal reaction. Okay, Marcus said, adjusting wires on the contraption he'd assembled from his communication equipment and parts of the alien's damaged translator. Let's try again. He typed a sequence into his laptop, which emitted a series of tonal patterns. Elzix's head crest flickered with interest. I cannot believe you're using musical theory to hack an alien language, Sarah said, placing mugs of hot water near each alien. And I really can't believe it's actually working. Music is mathematics, Marcus replied, not looking up from his keyboard. And mathematics is universal. They're using a tonal language based on harmonics, just like the frequency modulation algorithms you developed for military cryptography, Sarah finished. The ones that got you court-martialed. Marcus's fingers paused over the keyboard. That's not what happened. Really? Because last Christmas, Mom said. Mom doesn't know a damn thing about it. Marcus snapped, slamming the table. The classified systems I accessed contained evidence off. The translator suddenly emitted a complex harmonic sequence, interrupting their argument. All three aliens looked up sharply. What did it say? Sarah asked. Marcus checked the rough translation on his screen. Something about sibling emotional displays as information exchange protocols. Naya sat up suddenly, her silver-flecked skin flushing with a blue tint. She spoke rapidly, her musical language flowing into Marcus's device, which struggled to convert it. Fascinating. The mechanical translation emerged. Conflict generates communication breakthrough. Emotional stress is catalyst for cognitive leaps. Hypothesis supported. Elzix moved swiftly to Naya's side, speaking sharply. The translation came through in fragments. Officer Naya, forbidden research. High Council prohibition. Naya responded with what sounded like defiance, gesturing toward the humans. What's happening? Sarah asked. Marcus adjusted settings on his makeshift translator. I think we're witnessing an alien workplace dispute. Corvo unexpectedly spoke up, his deeper tones translating more clearly. Humans misunderstood. Federation believes your species dangerous, violent, primitive. He hesitated. We studied your transmissions, war films, fighting sports, weapons demonstrations. You learned about humans from our action movies. Sarah couldn't suppress a laugh. That's like judging a library by its horror section. Marcus's translator began working more smoothly as it processed more language. Elzix's words came through with growing clarity. Our civilization advances through careful planning. Each innovation vetted by committees, safety protocols, risk minimization. That explains the look on your face when I fixed your breathing filter with microwave parts, Sarah said to Corvo. The stocky alien's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. Unorthodox approach. No testing. No simulation. Just did it. Sometimes you have to improvise, Sarah shrugged. Improvise. Naya repeated the English word carefully, her crest raising with interest. Acting without complete data. Making intuitive connections. She turned to Elzix. This is precisely what my research explores. Intuitive cognition as valid methodology. Elzix's posture stiffened. Research prohibited by High Council decree. Intuitive leaps deemed unstable, dangerous. Silvery progress requires methodical. A sudden mechanical whine interrupted him. One of the alien breathing filters, the one Sarah had repaired, began emitting a high-pitched alarm. Microcircuit failure, Corvo announced, examining it. Temporary fix degrading. All our filters will fail within 18 Earth rotations. Can't you repair them properly? Marcus asked. Elzix's inner eyelids flicked rapidly. Proper repair requires cell-very fabrication systems. Resources unavailable on Quarantine World. Quarantine World? Sarah asked. Earth, Naya explained, her tone gentler than her companion's. Classified as developmentally volatile. Contact forbidden. Great, Marcus muttered. We rescued aliens who think we're too dangerous to talk to. When our filters fail, Corvo said bluntly, nitrogen exposure will cause systematic organ shutdown. The cabin fell silent save for the howling wind outside. Dawn broke clear and frigid after the blizzard, revealing a transformed landscape of pristine white broken only by the distant scar where the alien ship had crashed. Inside the cabin, Elzix hunched over a holographic display projected from a device no larger than a coin. Biological filter degradation is accelerating, he announced. Atmospheric contaminants have compromised primary molecular barriers. He manipulated the glowing symbols, recalculating survival probability. The display flashed a single symbol. What does that mean? Sarah asked, looking up from her microscope, where she'd been examining a sample of the filter material. 0. Naya translated softly. 0 probability of survival. Marcus laughed harshly from his corner, where he'd been monitoring radio frequencies. That's encouraging. It is simply mathematics, Elzix replied. Our ship's fabrication systems are destroyed. Earth technology is insufficient for proper repairs. The filters will fail in precisely 18.4 days. We will die. That's not how humans work, Sarah said, standing abruptly. We don't just accept death when the odds look bad. Probability is not odds, Elzix corrected. Probability is certainty expressed numerically. Your math is wrong, Sarah insisted. Elzix's head crest flattened. A sign they'd learned indicated offense. Silvery computational systems are never wrong. They're wrong when they don't account for variables they don't understand, Sarah countered. Like human ingenuity. Oh hell, Marcus interrupted, pressing his headphones tighter to his ear. We've got bigger problems. He turned up the volume on his radio, filling the cabin with a newscaster's voice. What authorities are calling a meteorite impact in Kluane National Park. Witnesses reported unusual lights in the sky Tuesday night. Park rangers have closed the eastern sector, while investigation teams are en route. How long before they reach the crash site? Sarah asked. Marcus switched frequencies, listening intently. Weather's slowed them down, but I'm picking up military channels. His expression darkened. That's not the Coast Guard or Park Service. That's ASTRA. What is ASTRA? Corvo asked. Advanced Scientific Threat Response Agency, Marcus answered grimly. Black budget operation. They handle unusual situations. Like aliens? Sarah's eyes widened. Exactly like aliens. Marcus continued scanning frequencies. They're mobilizing from CFB Cold Lake. Heavy transport choppers, containment equipment. Corvo tilted his head. Is this concerning? Perhaps your government could assist with our filters. Marcus gave a bitter laugh. They'd be more interested in taking you apart to see how you work. A painful silence followed, broken by a sudden wheezing gasp from Naya. Her silver skin had taken on a bluish tinge, and her breathing became labored. What's happening? Sarah rushed to her side. Her filter is failing faster than the others. Elzix explained, his clinical tone belied by the distress in his 4 pupilled eyes. Her physiology is more sensitive to nitrogen compounds. Sarah grabbed her medical kit. What treatments do you have? None suitable for this environment, Elzix admitted. As Sarah administered another carefully measured dose of epinephrine, Naya's eyes fluttered. She began speaking rapidly, her words slurring as the translator struggled to keep up. Joined expedition to prove. Intuitive intelligence hypothesis. High Council rejected. Decades of research suppressed. Need more data. She's delirious, Corvo said. Sarah checked Naya's vitals as best she could with equipment designed for humans. The epinephrine's buying time, but her system is under tremendous stress. Your government will find the crash site within 72 hours, Marcus said, still monitoring transmissions. They've got thermal imaging that can detect the heat signature even under the snow. We need to move her somewhere safer, Sarah decided. Impossible, Elzix stated. Movement increases metabolic rate, accelerating filter degradation. Ship computer calculates 0 survival. Stop saying that, Sarah snapped. Your ship computer didn't account for human help when it made that calculation. Elzix's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. Human assistance irrelevant to survival calculation. Your technological level is irrelevant. Sarah interrupted. Who saved Naya when she collapsed? Who fixed Corvo's breathing filter? Your calculations aren't accounting for variables outside your experience. That is not how probability works, Elzix insisted. Maybe not for Silveri, Sarah countered. But humans have been beating impossible odds throughout our history. We call it determination, faith, hope. Statistically invalid concepts, Elzix dismissed. Yet here we are. Sarah gestured to Naya's now stabilized form, keeping your officer alive despite your 0 probability. Outside, the distant whump-lump of helicopter rotors echoed across the mountains. They're coming, Marcus warned, already gathering essential equipment. We need to leave. Now. Sarah made a sudden decision. I'm going into town for supplies. Town, Elzix echoed, confused. Nearest settlement is 70 kilometers away, Marcus protested. In this weather? My snowmobile can make it, Sarah said, already pulling on her parka. We need medical supplies, electronics, tools, things I can't improvise from what we have here. You can't outrun those helicopters, Marcus warned. I'm not running from them, Sarah replied, checking her knife and emergency flares. I'm running toward a solution your aliens think is impossible. She turned to Elzix. Sometimes when probability says 0, you have to ignore the math and try anyway. As she stepped outside into the biting cold, the helicopter's distant rhythm grew steadily louder. The town of Whiteridge consisted of little more than a general store, a diner, a fire station, and a scattering of homes built to withstand the harsh Yukon winters. Sarah's snowmobile growled to a stop behind the fire station at 3 in the morning. She'd driven through the night, navigating treacherous mountain passes by the pale glow of northern lights. Her lock-picking skills, developed during field work in remote locations where keys were often lost, made quick work of the rear door. Inside, she located the emergency oxygen tanks but hesitated. Taking them wasn't mere theft. It potentially endangered lives. Someone there, a voice called. Sarah spun around to face a young woman in a heavy mechanic's coat, silhouetted in the doorway. Her dark hair was pulled into a practical braid, and her features suggested mixed Inuit and European ancestry. I can explain, Sarah began. You're Dr. Chen, the woman said, surprising her. Wildlife researcher. Wolf migration patterns. How did you? Small town. The woman stepped inside, closing the door. I'm Rebecca Okalik. Everyone knows when scientists come to the area. Her eyes narrowed at the oxygen tanks. What are you doing with those? Sarah's mind raced through potential lies before settling on an impossible truth. Trying to save lives. Whose lives? Rebecca pressed. You wouldn't believe me. Rebecca folded her arms. Try me. 20 minutes later, they sat in Rebecca's truck, heater blasting, as Sarah concluded her explanation. To her credit, Rebecca listened without interruption, her expression giving away nothing. Aliens, Rebecca finally said flatly. Yes. From space. Yes. And they're dying because our air is toxic to them. Exactly. Rebecca tapped her gloved fingers against the steering wheel. My mother was a chemical engineer before she married my father and moved here. My grandfather is Elder Joseph Okalik. He says star people visited our ancestors. Sarah blinked, uncertain how to respond. I'm not saying I believe you, Rebecca continued, starting the engine. But I want to see for myself. Where are we going? My workshop. If you're stealing oxygen tanks to save aliens, you're going to need more than that. When they returned to the cabin, Marcus was outside scanning the perimeter, a makeshift signal jammer constructed from spare parts strapped to his pack. You brought company, he said tersely, eyeing Rebecca. She brought supplies, Sarah corrected, and expertise. Inside, the situation had deteriorated. Naya lay unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. Corvo hunched over a disassembled filter, his four-fingered hands working with precise movements. Elzik stood when they entered, his posture rigid with distrust at the sight of Rebecca. Another human, he stated disapprovingly. Another solution you didn't calculate, Sarah countered, unloading supplies. Rebecca stood transfixed, staring at the aliens. Holy, they're really... Yes, Marcus said impatiently. E.T. phone home. Introductions later. Aesture established a perimeter 10 kilometers from here. We have hours, not days. Rebecca recovered quickly, kneeling beside the equipment Sarah unpacked. Oxygen tanks, good. But their biochemistry is different. They need filtration, not supplementation. We require molecular restructuring of nitrogen compounds, Corvo explained. Our filters convert Earth's atmosphere to Silveri-compatible chemistry. Rebecca frowned thoughtfully, like catalytic converters, but biological. She turned to Sarah. Have you called Professor Wayland? Who? Sarah asked. The nano-engineer who got blacklisted. Everyone knows he's hiding somewhere in these mountains. Marcus looked up sharply. Nathaniel Wayland, the government whistleblower. You know him? Sarah asked. He exposed illegal military applications of nanotechnology, Marcus said, then disappeared before they could arrest him. Rebecca nodded. Locals call him Professor. He helps with technical problems if you know how to reach him. She pulled out a handheld radio, tuning it to a specific frequency. And I know how. This professor, Elzik interrupted, possesses molecular engineering capabilities. He created programmable nanofilters for cleaning mining runoff, Rebecca explained. Banned technology now, but exactly what we need to reconfigure nitrogen molecules. She spoke into the radio, using coded language that Marcus recognized as similar to patterns used by off-grid communities. After a tense minute, a staticky voice responded. Elzik observed with obvious doubt. The probability of locating a specific human with specialized knowledge in this remote region is almost guaranteed, Rebecca interrupted, because this remote region is where people go when they want to disappear. She slipped into her coat. He'll meet us at my grandmother's workshop on the reservation. It's safer there. Travel exponentially increases filter degradation, Elzik objected. Staying here guarantees capture, Marcus countered, already packing. As they carefully moved Naya to Rebecca's truck, a distant mechanical whine caught their attention. A small drone appeared above the tree line, its camera swiveling toward them. ASTRA, Marcus whispered. Without hesitation, Rebecca raised her hunting rifle and fired. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks. Probability of surviving government capture? She asked Elzik pointedly. The alien's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. 0. Then I suggest we alter your variables, Rebecca said, climbing into the driver's seat. My grandfather says when the path ahead is blocked, wise travelers find a different mountain. Elder Joseph Okalik's workshop stood at the edge of the reservation, a sprawling structure of weathered wood and corrugated metal that had begun as a simple garage and expanded organically over decades. Inside, organized chaos reigned. Workbenches cluttered with mechanical parts, walls lined with tools, and shelves stocked with both modern equipment and traditional materials. The old man himself seemed unsurprised by the arrival of 3 aliens. He merely nodded when Rebecca made introductions, his weathered face impassive as though extraterrestrial visitors were a monthly occurrence. "Star travelers," he said simply. "The stories speak of your return." Elzix tilted his head. "Your ancestor knowledge included interspecies contact. Our oral traditions describe beings from beyond the sky," Joseph replied, helping them settle Naya onto a cot near the wood stove. "Silver skin, eyes like the night sky. Fascinating," Naya whispered weakly, her scientific curiosity piercing through her deteriorating condition. "Cultural memory, preserving ancient contact." A sharp knock interrupted them. Rebecca opened the door to admit a thin man with wild gray hair and alert eyes that darted constantly, assessing everything. He carried a heavy backpack and wore multiple layers of mismatched clothing. "This better be good, Becca," he grumbled, then stopped abruptly at the sight of the aliens. "Well, that qualifies." "Professor Wayland," Marcus said, stepping forward. "Your work on molecular reconstruction was groundbreaking." The man's eyes narrowed. "Military. I can smell it." He turned to leave. "Ex-military," Marcus corrected. "Dishonorably discharged for accessing classified files. About your research, actually." Wayland paused. "What files?" "Application scenarios for programmable matter, including atmospheric modification." A tense silence followed before the professor dropped his pack on a workbench. "You've got one chance to convince me this isn't a setup." Sarah quickly explained their situation, while Rebecca unpacked the supplies they'd gathered. Oxygen tanks, electronic components, chemicals from the high school lab, and parts from Rebecca's prized vintage snowmobile. Their filters convert atmospheric nitrogen to something their biology can process, Sarah concluded. But they're failing. "Impossible timeline," Wayland muttered, examining one of the damaged filters. 18 days. I'd need months. A lab, equipment. "Government teams are hunting us," Marcus added, scanning frequencies on his radio. "We have hours, maybe." Wayland laughed bitterly. "Then they're already dead." "Sorry, but that's reality." "Is that your professional assessment?" Elder Joseph asked quietly from where he was brewing tea from plants he'd gathered beneath the snow. "Or your fear speaking?" The workshop erupted into frenzied activity. Rebecca dismantled kitchen appliances and snowmobile parts, repurposing pressure valves and circuit boards. Marcus modified communications equipment to mask their electronic signatures. Wayland reluctantly unpacked experimental nanofilters designed for water purification, muttering about impossibilities. Elzix observed with growing bewilderment. "Your methodologies lack systematic progression. No coordinated research protocols. No simulation testing." "It's called parallel processing," Sarah explained, pipetting chemicals at a makeshift lab station. "We try multiple approaches simultaneously." "Inefficient," Elzix objected. "Resources wasted on failed attempts." "But faster," Sarah countered. "One approach might work." "Improbable." "One is enough." Elder Joseph worked quietly in the corner, grinding plants with a stone mortar. "These lichens," he explained to Corvo, who watched curiously. "They convert nitrogen in ways our ancestors discovered centuries ago, for treating lung ailments. Biological filtration through primitive methods." Corvo sounded skeptical but interested. "Knowledge isn't primitive or advanced," Joseph replied. "Only useful or not useful." Throughout the night, the unlikely team worked in a chaotic dance that horrified the methodical Silveri, but produced surprising results. Rebecca created pressure regulators from modified cooking equipment. Wayland's nanofilters, originally designed for removing mining contaminants from water, showed potential for atmospheric processing when reconfigured. Naya, drifting in and out of consciousness, watched the humans with intense interest. "Recording everything," she whispered to Sarah. "For my research." "Research?" Sarah asked, administering another careful dose of medication. "Intuitive cognition. High Council rejected my theory that intuition has scientific validity." Her four pupilled eyes focused intently on Sarah. "They believe only methodical, sequential reasoning produces reliable results." "Is that why you came on this mission?" "To study Earth. To find evidence that another approach to knowledge exists." Naya's breathing labored. "Our civilization stagnates. Millennia of careful planning. Perfect safety. No risks." A sudden exclamation from across the room interrupted them. Elder Joseph held up a beaker containing Wayland's nanoparticles suspended in an extract from his lichens. The mixture glowed with a faint blue luminescence. "The compounds are binding," Wayland said, sounding surprised. "The organic molecules are providing a framework for the nanoparticles." Corvo hurried over, scanner in hand. Molecular reconfiguration occurring at quaternary level. "How did you calculate this interaction?" "We didn't," Rebecca admitted. "We just tried it." "Impossible," Elzix stated, examining the readings. "The probability of random experimentation producing viable results is infinitesimal." "Yet there it is," Sarah said, nodding toward the glowing mixture. The sound of vehicles approaching broke the moment. Marcus rushed to the window. "Government SUVs. 3 of them." "ASTR." Wayland's face paled. "I recognize that agent. He's the one who destroyed my career when I refused to weaponize my research." Elder Joseph's grandson arrived through the back door just as ASTRA vehicles pulled up outside, bringing whispered news that government agents were establishing checkpoints on all roads leading from the reservation. "Back room, now," Rebecca ordered, ushering the aliens through a hidden door behind a storage shelf. She turned to her grandfather. "Your ceremonial regalia. Where is it?" The old man nodded in understanding, retrieving ornate traditional garments from a cedar chest. When ASTRA agents knocked minutes later, they found what appeared to be a traditional ceremony in progress. Elder Joseph in full regalia, burning sacred herbs while Rebecca, Sarah, Marcus, and Wayland sat in a circle, heads bowed. The lead agent, a sharp-featured man named Blackwood, was visibly frustrated but constrained by regulations regarding indigenous religious practices. "We're pursuing dangerous fugitives," he stated coldly. "Including you, Wayland." "Our ceremony cannot be interrupted," Elder Joseph replied calmly. "Federal law protects these practices." The temporary reprieve bought precious hours, but by nightfall, the team faced an impossible situation. The atmospheric filters showed promise. The combination of Wayland's nanoparticles and Joseph's lichen extracts successfully restructured nitrogen compounds, but without proper equipment to mass produce and calibrate the solution, they could only create temporary patches. "We need to contact the Silveri fleet," Elzix admitted reluctantly after examining their prototype. "This solution might sustain us for days, not weeks. Without proper medical intervention, Naya will not survive." "And exactly how do we call your interstellar friends?" Marcus asked. "Our most powerful radio transmitters can barely reach Mars." Elzix hesitated. "There is a distress protocol, a quantum-entangled communicator in our ship's emergency beacon, but it was damaged in the crash." Sarah looked to Marcus. "Could you repair it?" "Maybe. If we could reach it, which we can't, with ASTRA surrounding us." Silence fell, broken only by Naya's labored breathing. "There's another option," Marcus said finally, his expression darkening. "But it means facing my past." All eyes turned to him. "HARP facility," he continued. "High atmosphere research platform. It's a military installation about 90 kilometers north. Officially, it studies auroras and ionospheric phenomena. Unofficially," Sarah prompted, "it houses the most powerful signal array in the Western Hemisphere, designed to detect and analyze deep space communications." Wayland's eyes widened. Project Sentinel. I worked on components for that. It's not just for listening. It can transmit. How do you know about this facility? Elzix asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. I was stationed there before my discharge. That's where I accessed the classified files that ended my career. So we break into a top-secret military facility? Rebecca asked incredulously. Not we, Marcus corrected. Me. I still know the access protocols. The command officer is Colonel Hayes, my former commanding officer. The one who had you court-martialed? Sarah asked. She didn't have a choice. I violated direct orders. Something in Marcus's expression softened slightly. But she made sure I got discharged rather than imprisoned. This remains a near-zero probability of success, Elzix objected. Sometimes near-zero is all you need, Marcus replied. While the others prepared the improved atmospheric filters, Marcus outlined his plan. Rebecca and Elder Joseph would create a diversion by leaking false information about the crash site location. Sarah would accompany Marcus and the aliens to the HARP facility. Wayland would remain behind to continue refining the filters, using his underground connections to arrange transportation. This is suicide, Wayland objected. No, Marcus corrected. This is human ingenuity. As they prepared to depart that night, Elzix received a faint signal on his partially repaired communicator. His 4 pupil eyes widened as he translated the message. The Silveri High Council has received automated crash telemetry, he said, his voice unnaturally flat. They've declared our mission unsalvageable. Meaning? Sarah asked. They've dispatched a sterilization fleet, standard protocol for compromised missions on quarantine worlds. Sterilization, Rebecca echoed. All evidence of Silveri presence will be eliminated, Elzix explained clinically, including any natives who had contact with us. The implications hung heavy in the silence that followed. How long until they arrive? Marcus asked. Approximately 17 Earth hours. Sarah's expression hardened. Then we have 17 hours to change their minds. Let's go. Outside, the northern lights danced across the sky, beautiful and oblivious to the fate of those watching from below. As their makeshift convoy prepared to depart, satellite imagery showed 3 large objects decelerating as they entered the outer solar system. The HARP facility rose from the snowy landscape like an alien structure itself, a complex of white domes and towering antenna arrays illuminated by floodlights that cut through the darkness. After a harrowing journey evading checkpoints and patrols, their small group crouched behind a snowbank, studying the perimeter. Security's been upgraded since my time, Marcus muttered, observing the additional guard posts and scanning equipment. Can we still get in? Sarah asked, supporting a weakened Nea. The maintenance tunnel should still work, Marcus replied. If my access codes haven't been purged. And if they have? Corvo asked. Marcus met the alien's 4-pupiled gaze. Then we improvise. Surprisingly, the access codes worked. Minutes later, they navigated through dimly lit service corridors, Marcus leading with the confidence of someone returning home. They reached the facility's central command hub just as alarms began blaring. They've detected the Silveri ships, Marcus explained, rushing to a control station. We don't have much time. Colonel Andrea Hayes stood at the center of the hub, her stern face illuminated by dozens of screens showing the approaching objects. When she turned and saw Marcus, her expression shifted through surprise, anger, and something unreadable. Lieutenant Johnson, she said evenly, as though he'd merely been absent for a day rather than years. Her eyes moved to the aliens. I see you've brought friends. Colonel, Marcus acknowledged. We need to use the array. You're asking me to let aliens access our most sensitive communications technology. Her voice remained calm, but her hand moved subtly toward her sidearm. I'm asking you to prevent an interstellar incident, Marcus corrected. Those ships up there, they're coming to sterilize Earth. A tense standoff followed as Marcus explained the situation. Throughout his explanation, Hayes's expression remained unreadable, her eyes occasionally flicking to the weakened Naya, whom Sarah continued to support. "You violated your oath once before, Johnson," Hayes said finally. "Why should I trust you now?" "Because you know why I violated it," Marcus replied quietly. "The classified files I accessed. The contingency plans for first contact. Protocol 117. Hayes nodded. "Capture, contain, dissect. Is that who we are?" Marcus challenged. "Is that who you are?" A pregnant silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beep of sensors tracking the approaching Silveri vessels. "You have 10 minutes, Hayes decided suddenly, typing a command that granted Marcus access to the array. "Make them count." While Marcus worked feverishly to configure the transmitter, Elzix prepared a formal message to the approaching fleet, but it was Naya who surprised them all, pushing herself upright despite her weakness. "Not a formal petition," she insisted. "They'll reject it automatically. Silveri High Council operates on precedent and protocol." "What then?" Sarah asked. "My research data," Naya replied. "All of it. The recordings of human problem-solving. The empirical evidence of intuitive cognition." Elzix's head crest flattened in alarm. "That violates council decree. The penalty is..." "Irrelevant," Naya cut him off with uncharacteristic firmness. "There's an ancient law, the principle of cognitive preservation. Any species demonstrating unique mental approaches must be protected for the collective knowledge of the cosmos." Elzix stared at her. "That law hasn't been invoked in 7 millennia. "Because no species has qualified," Naya countered. "Until now." With trembling hands, she connected her recording device to the console Marcus had prepared. The transmission began just as the first Silveri vessel entered Earth's upper atmosphere. The response was immediate and furious. The fleet commander, appearing as a holographic projection, denounced Elzix's actions as treasonous and dismissed Naya's research as contaminated by primitive influence. What happened next would later be described in human history books as the demonstration. Naya, gathering her remaining strength, posed a complex theoretical problem that Silveri mathematicians had debated for centuries, involving multidimensional probability calculations, impossible to solve without years of computation. The fleet commander scoffed. Sarah studied the equation displayed on the screen. "It's a path optimization problem," she realized, "similar to what we use in ecological modeling." What followed was a remarkable display of complementary thinking. Sarah sketched an intuitive approach, Marcus applied communication theory principles, and Colonel Hayes contributed strategic analysis. Together, they mapped a solution path that the aliens' rigid methodologies had never considered. The commander's dismissal turned to disbelief as the humans, working with messy, intuitive leaps, unraveled a problem that had stymied Silveri theorists for generations. "Impossible," he whispered. "No," Naya corrected, her voice strengthening with vindication. "Simply a different way of knowing." The Silveri High Council convened an emergency session, their debate transmitted to the HARP facility as Earth's military leaders gathered in crisis centers worldwide, tracking the alien ships now holding position in orbit. The Council's decision, when it finally came, was unprecedented. Humans were officially classified as possessing intuitive intelligence, a theoretical cognitive approach previously considered impossible, but now recognized as complementary to Silveri methodical reasoning. In accordance with the principle of cognitive preservation, the Council Elder announced, "Earth is reclassified from quarantine status to protected cognitive reserve." As tensions eased and diplomatic channels formally opened, the aliens' medical needs were quickly addressed with proper Silveri technology. In the aftermath, the Silveri representatives offered Earth advanced technology as a gesture of goodwill. Sarah surprised everyone by declining. "Technology without understanding creates dependence, not partnership," she explained. "We propose something different." Her alternative, a joint human-Silveri research initiative combining methodical alien approaches with human creativity. Elder Joseph would share indigenous knowledge with fascinated Silveri anthropologists. Rebecca and Professor Wayland would work with Corvo on sustainable technology. Marcus found himself appointed as a liaison between Earth's military and the Silveri fleet. 1 year later, Naya and Sarah co-published a revolutionary paper titled Cross-Species Cognitive Complementarity, demonstrating how the combination of Silveri methodical analysis and human intuitive leaps created solutions neither approach could achieve alone. "We needed each other," Sarah explained to a reporter covering the story. "Their precision and our creativity, their patience and our adaptability. Sometimes the universe brings together exactly what belongs together." As she spoke, new signals appeared on AARP's detection array, representatives from 3 other spacefaring civilizations, expressing interest in this unexpected alliance between careful planners and intuitive innovators.